Hello, here I am again with a woman's perspective on Proverbs. So how's your heart been this week? Have you been guarding it well? The last few weeks I've chosen to talk from verses where there are several on the same topic mentioned throughout the book of Proverbs. This week I've done the same thing, but I'm also delving a bit more on something I touched on last week, guarding our words. This week's topic that stood out to me is gossip. Proverbs 26:20. Without wood a fire goes out. Without a gossip, a quarrel or conflict dies down. Sadly, women and gossip seem to go hand in hand. I don't need to give the definition of gossip, as I'm sure we're all aware and have heard or participated in gossip at some stage of our life. Now, when a group of women are together, sometimes the conversation steers itself to talking about another person who isn't present, which is in itself fine. It's once the conversation starts going down a path where you know that if that person was present, then they would not like what was being said, either because it was hurtful or unjustified, it may not even be fact, or it's breaking a confidence they have shared. In most circumstances, if what is being said would not be said if the person was present, then it's probably gossip. And although women are accused of being gossipers when they're together, it's not actually just women that gossip. I know of males that also love to listen and contribute to unconfirmed rumours and stories and slander. Gossip. Let's not hold back. Gossip hurts and it can do immense damage. About 22 years ago, when we were about to commence our ministry in Melbourne, and a couple of days before our induction service, I got sick. I was throwing up for a couple of days. The morning of our induction, I was feeling a little better and knew I couldn't miss this special service because it wasn't just centred around David, but both of us. So despite feeling weak, off we all went to the service. When we arrived, nausea hit me again, and as the service was about to start, I was back in the bathroom, and I won't describe what happened. I made it to the service, and then it was time for us to be welcomed, presented, and prayed for. Well, as you can imagine, standing still for that long on a stage, especially being so weak, the stage lights were on, a hot sweat broke out, and I was wavering, which fortunately someone in the front row noticed in a nick of time. They jumped up on the stage, managed to guide me into a chair as I was passing out. So there I was on the stage facing everybody in the congregation with my head down between my knees. Not a great way to start. I was mortified. It wasn't too long after that we heard there was a rumour going around that I was pregnant. Obviously, someone had suspected the reason I fainted and then talked about it with someone else who talked about it with someone else, and suddenly it was fact. And that's how gossip works. Fortunately for me, I wasn't pregnant, which eventually became quite obvious to everybody, and even more fortunately, it wasn't gossip that was hurtful or terribly damaging. Unlike gossip that was shared about a friend of mine, I won't go into all the details or circumstances except to say a group of Christians, in their concern that there was an inappropriate male-female relationship developing, started talking about it with each other and never actually approached or confronted the people involved. Instead, the gossip spread without anyone checking the facts, only sharing judgment to each other and not care for those it was about. In actual fact, they had the situation completely wrong, but the hurt and betrayal it caused meant that sadly my friend has walked away from the church. We're still friends, and I pray that this will not always be the case. Sadly, this outcome is not the only time I hear of people who used to be involved in the church, but the church, who is the body of us believers, hurt them, so they have turned their back on it. Like I mentioned in the beginning, there was many proverbs written about gossip and slander. Slander being the worst form of gossip, because slanderous gossip has no truth in it. Here's what else Proverbs says. A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. I actually like this one, it makes me laugh. And I'm pretty sure we all know that talk too much gossiper. Solomon says, avoid them. A gossip betrays confidence, but a trustworthy person keeps a secret. This verse also starts with a gossip betrays a confidence. Betrayal is not a quality you want in a friend, or wise friends don't want that quality in you. And a gossip separates close friends. If a gossip can separate close friends, then that's some pretty devastating effects. Lastly, the words of gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost parts. People love a bit of gossip. Not that that's a good thing, but if you think about it, tabloid papers, magazines, social commentators makes heaps of money on spreading gossip. They report it as if it's fact. And he who spreads slander is a fool. Slanderous gossip makes you the fool to spread it, and it could be very costly to you, not just the person you slander. I picked this particular verse today because I like the comparison of fire and gossip. Without wood, a fire goes out. This part is obvious. You need fuel to keep a fire going. Feed a fire and it stays alive. Feed it more and it grows. And if there is too much fuel, it can grow out of control. We witnessed this happen last December and January with Australia's destructive bushfires, the total devastation and heartache that is left behind when an out of control rips through an area. Part 2 of the verse, without gossip, a quarrel or conflict dies down. If gossip is like fire, then don't feed it and it will die. But when it is fed by people listening to it, contributing to it, and spreading it, it can take on a life of its own. And just like those devastating bushfires, it can leave ruin, destruction, and suffering in its wake. So without question, gossip is bad news. Keep away from it. Nip it in the bud if you hear gossip. Be a gossip firefighter and put out those flames. And most importantly, learn to control our tongues so we aren't the ones feeding the gossip. Just like tongues of fire, we could be the reason the fire gets out of control. James 3 says, "The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell." It may be small, but uncontrolled, it can cause some serious damage. In Christian circles, we can sometimes try to justify our gossip by saying, "Oh, we're just discussing a prayer point." I know, I'm guilty of saying that. We need to be very careful. James 1 says, "Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless." Wow, that's confronting. Ask yourself in that situation, are you really talking about someone out of prayerful concern? Or is it actually just a tender morsel of gossip? We need to guard our tongues, to control them. Psalms says, "Set a guard over my mouth, Lord. Keep watch over the door of my lips." Don't let gossip or slander out of that door. Instead, we should use our tongues to build each other up. Ephesians 4. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only when it is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Imagine how wonderful our church, our family, our friends, our community, our whole world would be if we all followed the advice to build others up. So here's our challenge this week: to guard our words, rein in our tongues, don't gossip, avoid those who gossip. But if you can't avoid them, then be a firefighter and stamp out that gossip. Instead, let's use our tongues for good, for worship, for building others up, and always practice love. Thanks for listening. Keep control of that tongue and have a fabulous week.